What do you really want? So, this is a question that I found myself asking myself this past month. And first of all, I need to say, right, there's a distinction between want, which is just a craving, right? Any craving you have, hundreds and thousands of them during the day. These aren't what you really want, these are just wants, right? But when I say really want, I mean, like, what do you have a deep desire for, right? And so, at this stage of your life and development, what are you really, really after? Is it financial success, a good physique, sexual success, social success, right? Detachment, emotional mastery. But even saying something like emotional mastery just isn't good enough for our purpose because it's vague and so it's not clear what exactly you want. It's just so for example, what is emotional mastery, right? Ask yourself that question if that's what you want. And what does it look like tangibly in your day-to-day scenarios? How would that play out, right? You'd go into this situation or that situation. How would you act? What would you think? What would you feel? Right? And how would this be the product of your emotional mastery and your work? And so let's focus on emotional mastery because this is a personal example for me. And so when I explored this, I said, I want detachment and I want confidence and I want to eliminate my negative thinking and emotions. And so, for example, I imagined myself, right, going into a social situation and just being completely thoughtless, no self conscious thoughts, no negative thoughts or emotions or fear, right? And, that was exactly, I played it out, I want this, I want that. And that made it easier for me to know what I want to do. So if you do this process yourself, right, then you may think what you want is impossible. And then for you, that process will stop because there's no point of continuing or even trying, right, if you think what you want is impossible. But if you do think it's possible, then you continue and you will write down how you plan to get there. And so, why I've already mentioned this in another video, right, which is that research and development is a very large chunk of this work because doing things isn't enough if you don't know what to do. And so you really need to spend time researching, learning things from hundreds of sources, right? Online, offline, everywhere, and testing out every single thing in your own life, getting empirical research and data of every method, right? And then you stick with the ones that appear to work. Now, this is a big sort of caveat, right? Appear to work. What does that mean? Because, you know, sometimes you're deluded, right? And so what you think matters or is helping you isn't, and vice versa. And so how do you distinguish between these different, whether something is useful or it's a trick? It's a very hard one. And so I can only think of personal anecdotes. So for me, the activities that I really value and that have the most return for me are always those which, I do them initially and then I get this very sort of big high. And then after that big high in maybe a few hours and maybe a few days, but then it kind of dies down. And then I start getting more constant, modest returns on that activity. And then, it's like you're scrambling because you want to get that high back. And for a lot of people, they will quit at this stage, right? Because, you know, the problem is when you get this high, it makes you hungry for more progress, but it also makes you a bit dejected because when you lose that high, you suddenly think, well, maybe it was a fluke, right? Maybe this activity doesn't actually work, and that was just a random high I got. And so the problem is that high, it's showing you what you could get in, say, like 10 years, right? From doing this activity. It's not just what you're going to have forever. It's not magic, right? You have to work for years on this skill to even get back close to what that initial high was. And so obviously you can tell, right? The things that I'm saying, these examples, they're all about these mental things like meditation. Okay, right? But I think this idea is still true to an extent in every area of your life, right? You initially go to the gym, you feel great, you make, these sudden gains or something, right? Or you feel great. But then what happens? That high goes away, you feel unmotivated, you feel lazy, you don't want to go anymore. And to get back to the original benefits that brought you to the gym, you're going to have to stick with it for years. And so, your choice is to quit or to somehow persist, right? And keep doing it forever and ever and ever until you get back close to that initial benefit that you saw from it. And so the final step is, as I've already insinuated, to stick with the activity, right? Every few months, check back, right? Are you getting closer to your goals, right? But when you ask yourself these questions, you need to be careful, right? Because your mind, again, is going to try to trick you, just like with the other part of the, every part of this cycle, your mind is going to try to trick you, right? For example, you're going to have a bad day, right? Let's say you're meditating, you're going to have a bad day, right? Or one day you go to the gym and you just feel really skinny. And you're going to think to yourself, there's no point, it doesn't work. I'm going to quit this shit, right? And then you quit because you think to yourself on that day, I've not made any progress, but it's a trick that your mind is using. So don't just quit because you have one bad day. You have to really see, am I growing consistently? Every few months, check in. And, even a few months may not be enough to even receive any returns on the investment of some activity, right? For me, when I started meditating, before I saw, the first proper gains, this was three years ago, right? The first proper gains came, I remember, 250 hours after I started. 250 hours of meditation, and that's 1 hour a day for 3/4 of a year, or 2/3 of a year. And that's before I even saw any tangible improvement. And maybe another way, which is what I often use, is to try and remember the past. And sometimes you'll remember the past and how terrible it was. And then you'll realize, I've definitely improved a lot. And so these thoughts that are occurring of, oh, I haven't improved, it's going terribly, it's just it becomes an obvious lie when you remember, especially with these mental things, you realize how terrible, just how awful the past was. And it does make you laugh. And, the issue is that you become used to the present state, right? You become used to what's happening now. And so unless you get sudden highs, you won't notice if you've improved. And so you really need to be avid, right? With the gym, it's easy because you've got, even with your looking at your physique in the mirror, most people can't even tell they've made gains, right? The only real evidence people have, even in something like that, which is very physical and should be obvious, is just with weighing yourself. And then even with weighing yourself, maybe you're just losing fat and gaining muscle, right? So your weight doesn't even change, and then you're just thinking, what the fuck, right? I haven't made any gains, or so it seems, right? Or maybe it's taking time. And so good luck, because this isn't easy, and you're going to be deceived and deceived and deceived and deceived. But maybe you'll win in the end. And it depends if you're willing to take the bet.